You've met them before, maybe in the form of a charismatic friend who slowly turned manipulative, or a mentor who seemed enlightened until you saw how they treated others, or even a romantic partner who mirrored all your wounds back at you with terrifying precision. There's a pattern here, a shadow. Carl Jung once said, "The brighter the light, the darker the shadow." And this video is about that darkness, not in others, but in the people who refuse to look at it. You need to understand this now, because if you don't, you'll keep falling into the same trap, trusting people who look whole, but are secretly controlled by everything they repress. They wear masks, they say the right things, but behind the mask they are ticking time bombs of unresolved trauma. And when their mask slips, they don't take responsibility. They blame you, gaslight you, punish you. And if you don't know how to spot it, you'll think it's your fault. You'll spiral. You'll try harder, you'll over-explain, over-give, over-fix, and before you know it, your nervous system is in pieces, and your self-worth has been dragged through the dirt. So here's the truth. There is one pattern, one psychological trait that is so dangerous, so corrosive, and so invisible at first, that Jung believed it could destroy not just individuals, but entire societies. It's this, a refusal to confront the shadow. The shadow is the part of us that holds everything we don't want to see. The jealousy, the rage, the manipulation, the shame, the selfishness, the cruelty, the fear. Everyone has it. The problem isn't the shadow itself. The problem is people who won't admit they have one. Because when someone refuses to see their shadow, they start projecting it onto others. They become dangerous. To you, to your sense of reality, to your healing. Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So what happens when someone is completely ruled by their unconscious? They believe they're always right, that everyone else is toxic, that they're the victim, even when they're the one causing harm. They spiritualize their denial. They weaponize therapy language. They manipulate through guilt and spiritual superiority. They love bomb you, mirror your wounds, and then blame you for bleeding. This is not just narcissism. It's unconsciousness weaponized. And it's worse when it comes wrapped in spiritual clothes, in light and love, in healing talk, in smiles and affirmations. Because it hides the shadow behind words like boundaries, self-care, or high vibrations. But inside, it's all projection. They don't see you, they only see the parts of themselves they hate. And that is why you need to get away. Not because you hate them, but because you love yourself. You can't heal around someone who punishes you for having needs. You can't grow around someone who makes you responsible for their wounds. And you can't stay around someone who expects you to carry the weight of their shadow while they float above it, pretending they've transcended ego. The truth? They haven't. They've just created a more sophisticated mask. Carl Jung didn't ask us to be perfect. He asked us to be whole. And wholeness means facing the parts of ourselves that are ugly, selfish, jealous, insecure. The moment someone tells you they've done all their inner work, run. The people who have truly faced their shadow never claim to be done. They're humble, curious, accountable. They ask questions. They listen when you express pain. They don't just talk about empathy, they live it. They are safe, not because they're perfect, but because they are aware. And that's the difference. People who reject their shadow are not aware. They're performative. They curate an image. And when reality cracks that image, they lash out. Not at the mirror, but at the person holding it. Usually, that's you. So if you've ever found yourself confused in a relationship, questioning your memory, feeling like nothing you do is enough, constantly apologizing and shrinking your light just to keep the peace, you are probably dealing with someone who hasn't met their shadow. And here's the truth. If they haven't met their shadow, eventually, you will. You'll be the one who sees their rage when they're triggered. You'll be the one they blame when they feel small. You'll be the one who holds their darkness while they preach about light. Don't do it. You're not their therapist. You're not their mirror. You're not their punching bag. You are a person with your own wounds, your own story, and your own right to heal in safety. So how do you spot this pattern early? Listen to how they talk about others. Is everyone from their past crazy, toxic, or jealous? Red flag. Watch how they react to accountability. Do they deflect, blame, shut down, or attack? Red flag. Notice how they speak when you're in pain. Do they center themselves? Minimize your experience? Compare your wounds to theirs? Red flag. And most of all, trust your body. If you feel confused, heavy, anxious, or drained around them, it's not because you're broken. It's because your nervous system is picking up on incoherence, on the mismatch between their words and their energy, on the performance. Get away. You don't need to demonize them, but you do need distance, space to breathe, space to see clearly, space to stop abandoning yourself in the name of being understanding. There's nothing noble about being a sponge for someone else's unintegrated wounds. Your healing matters. And healing starts when you choose truth over performance. When you stop romanticizing potential and start respecting reality. When you stop trying to fix people who don't even admit they're broken. This is the power of shadow work. It not only heals you, it protects you. It helps you discern who's safe, who's stuck, and who's slowly pulling you into their inner chaos. In the next section, we'll explore why some people become so identified with their persona, how early trauma, cultural conditioning, and spiritual bypassing keep them trapped in these harmful patterns, and how you can heal your own wounds without being consumed by theirs. So why do some people run so hard from their shadow? To understand this, we have to go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of their relationship with you, the beginning of their relationship with themselves. Most people who deny their shadow didn't wake up one day and decide to become manipulative or toxic. In fact, many of them were once deeply sensitive children. Children who were punished, rejected, or neglected for having very human emotions. They cried and were told they were too dramatic. They got angry and were labeled bad. They asked questions and were shut down, mocked, or ignored. And slowly, without even realizing it, they learned the most dangerous lesson of all. Some parts of me are unacceptable. This is where the shadow begins, not in adulthood, but in childhood. When a child is taught that their anger, fear, sadness, or even joy is wrong, they split. They push those parts underground. They create a persona, a mask of acceptability, and slowly lose contact with their authentic self. Carl Jung described the persona as the social mask we wear to fit into society. It's not inherently bad. We all need some kind of persona to navigate the world. The problem starts when we mistake the mask for the self. When people become so attached to being the nice one, the strong one, the spiritual one, that any challenge to that identity feels like a threat. And when their shadow starts to rise, when anger, jealousy, insecurity, or grief start bubbling up, they panic, they reject it, they deny it. And because the psyche can't destroy those parts, it has to find somewhere else to put them. So it projects onto you, onto the world. This is how people become dangerous without realizing it. They demonize others for feeling what they themselves cannot tolerate. They judge someone's sadness because they've buried their own. They attack your boundaries because deep down they don't believe they deserve any. And in spiritual communities, this gets even more complex, because now the mask doesn't just look like kind or confident, it looks like enlightened. You've seen it. The healer who shames you for crying, saying you're not in alignment. The coach who talks about high vibrations while emotionally abusing their clients. The influencer who preaches about love and light but can't handle feedback without erupting into narcissistic rage. This isn't spirituality, this is spiritual bypassing. A term coined by psychologist John Wellwood, spiritual bypassing is when people use spiritual beliefs to avoid facing unresolved emotional wounds. Instead of doing shadow work, they meditate it away. Instead of processing trauma, they declare that everything is an illusion. Instead of feeling grief, they say they've transcended ego. And while this might sound harmless, it's not. Because behind the mask of positivity is often a mountain of pain. And when that pain gets triggered, they don't know how to deal with it. So they lash out. Not consciously, but through subtle tactics like guilt-tripping, gaslighting, spiritual superiority, and passive aggression. You see, the shadow doesn't disappear just because someone lights incense and recites affirmations. In fact, when spiritual tools are used to suppress emotion instead of integrate it, the shadow only grows more powerful. It becomes cunning, manipulative. It starts hiding behind smiles and sacred language, and that's what makes it so dangerous. Because now you can't even call it out. without being accused of being negative or in low vibration. Carl Jung warned us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And in modern culture, we've given people endless ways to avoid that confrontation. Social media teaches us to curate, filter, and perform perfection. Pop psychology gives us labels to justify every behavior. And spiritual trends tell us to manifest our way out of pain instead of feeling it. So when someone builds their whole identity around being positive, wise, or unbothered, they become hostile to anything that threatens that image, including your truth. And when that happens, the shadow doesn't just hurt them, it starts to hurt you. You'll be told your boundaries are walls, your emotions are too much, your needs are codependent, and your trauma is a projection. You'll start to question your own sanity, thinking, maybe I really am the problem. But you're not. What you're seeing is not your failure, it's their fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of being seen, fear of touching the parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime avoiding. But here's the thing, you can't fix that for them. No amount of empathy, compassion, or patience can make someone face what they refuse to acknowledge. Only they can do that. And many won't, because they're too invested in their persona. They've built relationships, careers, even entire followings around an image. To admit they're flawed feels like death to the ego. So instead they double down. They get louder, more performative, more controlling. And the more they resist their shadow, the more chaotic their relationships become. That's why Jung emphasized individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole. Wholeness doesn't mean perfection, it means integration. It means looking at the parts of yourself you've tried to hide, not to shame them, but to reclaim them. And when someone refuses to do that, they become fragmented, split between the person they pretend to be and the truth that keeps trying to surface. If you stay too close for too long, you'll get caught in that fragmentation. You'll start losing yourself trying to hold them together. So how do you protect yourself? By facing your own shadow. Because the more you integrate your darkness, the more clearly you'll see theirs. You'll stop confusing guilt with empathy. You'll stop mistaking spiritual talk for spiritual maturity. And most of all, you'll stop abandoning yourself just to stay connected. Here's a radical truth. Real connection requires boundaries. It requires truth. It requires the courage to say, I love you, but I won't carry this for you. Because if you don't, you're not helping them. You're enabling their denial. And while compassion is beautiful, it's not a substitute for discernment. You can be loving and walk away. You can be kind and call out projection. You can be spiritual and say, this is not mine to hold. In the next part, we'll explore what a healthy relationship to the shadow looks like. How people who do their inner work behave differently. What real healing feels like. And how to cultivate that energy in your life, your relationships, and your own self-awareness. Now let's look at what happens when someone has faced their shadow and begun to integrate it. These are the people you want to keep close. Because they don't pretend to be perfect. They don't need to. They've seen the worst in themselves, and instead of running from it, they've sat with it, listened to it, made peace with it. This doesn't mean they're always calm or never triggered. It means they take responsibility when they are. They don't deflect, blame, or manipulate. They reflect. They pause and ask, why did I react that way? They track their emotions instead of projecting them, and when they mess up, they own it. They apologize without making excuses. They don't see vulnerability as weakness, but as the doorway to connection. You can feel this in their presence. There's a groundedness, an emotional maturity, an ability to hold space for both your joy and your pain without needing to fix, change, or invalidate it. They've stopped fighting their inner world, so they're no longer at war with the outer one. This is the fruit of real shadow work. Not just reading Jung or talking about archetypes, but facing your shame, your guilt, your envy, your grief, and bringing those parts back into the light. It's not glamorous, it's not something you can showcase on social media. It's quiet, internal, and deeply uncomfortable, because it forces you to admit, I'm not who I pretend to be. It asks you to let go of being the good one, the strong one, the smart one, or the healed one, and instead, be real. This is where true healing begins. You stop trying to win approval and start telling the truth. You stop chasing enlightenment and start embracing your humanity. And when you do that, something beautiful happens. You no longer fear the shadow in others. You recognize it. You've seen it in yourself. So you stop reacting to it blindly. You stop trying to rescue people from their own darkness. You stop taking things personally when they lash out, because you know it's not about you. And most importantly, you learn to walk away with love instead of resentment. This is the emotional boundary that only integrated people can hold. I see your pain. I understand it, but I will not absorb it. They don't weaponize empathy against themselves. They know the difference between compassion and self-abandonment. They can sit with your truth without making it about them. And they won't punish you for having needs, boundaries, or emotions, because they've already made peace with their own. These are the relationships that feel safe, not because there's no conflict, but because there's honesty, accountability, room to grow, and space to be imperfect. Jung believed that wholeness comes not by being good, but by becoming conscious. And consciousness means seeing the parts of ourselves we'd rather avoid and choosing to love them anyway. That's what people with integrated shadows do. They don't confuse peace with silence. They don't use spiritual terms to avoid discomfort. They don't try to control reality with positive thinking. They accept life as it is, with all its beauty, chaos, and contradiction. They've learned that true power isn't dominance, it's integration. The ability to hold opposites without breaking, to feel rage and still choose grace, to feel fear and still act with courage, to feel triggered and still take responsibility. These are the markers of someone who's done the work. So how do you know if you're doing this work too? Start by asking, where do I over-identify with my persona? What feelings make me uncomfortable in others and why? When do I shame, silence, or dismiss parts of myself? What am I afraid people might see in me? These questions aren't easy, but they're the doorway to authenticity. Because the more you can answer them honestly, the more whole you become. And the more whole you are, the more naturally you'll repel those who aren't ready to do the same. You won't need to argue with them, or fix them, or prove your worth. Your energy will speak for itself. People who haven't integrated their shadow won't feel safe around you, not because you've done something wrong, but because your presence triggers their avoidance. And that's okay. You're not here to make everyone comfortable. You're here to become real, to return to yourself, and to protect the peace that comes with that. Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that privilege comes with a cost. You have to let the false self die. The self that was built to please, to hide, to survive. You have to grieve the masks, release the personas, and trust that what remains, your raw, messy, imperfect wholeness, is more than enough, because it is. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You don't have to be healed to be worthy. You don't have to be wise to be safe. You just have to be honest. Honest with yourself. Honest with others. Honest about your pain, your patterns, your fears, and your desires. And when you are, you'll start to see clearly who's willing to meet you there, who's capable of emotional depth, and who's still hiding behind their mask. Not everyone will join you on that path, but that's not your job. Your job is to keep walking, to keep becoming, to keep choosing truth over performance, integration over projection, and love, real love, over illusion. In the next block, we'll go even deeper. We'll talk about the red flags you should never ignore, the patterns of avoidance that masquerade as virtue, and the subtle ways the unintegrated shadow sabotages connection. You'll learn how to spot it, how to respond to it, and most importantly, how to protect your own growth in the process. Let's go deeper now. There's a particular danger in people who've never met their shadow, but have learned to perform virtue. They talk like healers, they act like saints. They present themselves as deeply spiritual, endlessly kind, unwaveringly positive. But underneath that polished exterior is something deeply unsettled. Carl Jung called this the persona trap. The persona is the mask we wear to navigate society. It's not inherently bad, everyone needs one. It's how we function in groups, build relationships, play roles. But when someone believes their mask is who they truly are, it becomes a prison. And what's worse, it becomes a weapon. You'll notice it in people who cannot tolerate discomfort, not in themselves and not in others. They will shut down real emotions by labeling them low vibrational. They'll avoid conflict by calling it negative energy. They'll ghost conversations that challenge them, and then say they're just protecting their peace. But real peace isn't silent avoidance. It's the ability to engage from a grounded place. These people aren't bad. They're not evil. But they're dangerous to your growth, because they'll invite you into relationships that look safe on the surface but punish authenticity underneath. They'll reward your compliance and spiritual bypassing, but shame your anger, your sadness, your grief. In short, they don't want your whole self. They only want the version of you that doesn't disrupt their mask. And if you try to be real, they will make you feel like the problem. This is where you must trust your body more than your logic. Because these individuals can be highly convincing. They've read the right books, they quote the right authors, they even know how to speak the language of healing and depth. But it's all performance. And your nervous system will know. You'll feel like you're walking on eggshells, but won't be able to name why. You'll feel exhausted after talking to them, but blame yourself for being too sensitive. You'll start to doubt your intuition. That's how you know you're in the presence of an unintegrated persona. Here's what to look out for. 1. Chronic positivity. They refuse to acknowledge darkness, struggle, or complexity. Everything must be love and light. If you bring up anything uncomfortable, they either reframe it instantly or disappear emotionally. 2. Spiritual superiority. They position themselves as more evolved than others. They may not say it directly, but it's implied in how they speak, post, and interact. They avoid accountability by hiding behind their higher vibration. 3. Deflection of conflict. When disagreements arise, they retreat, blame, or gaslight. They may say things like, "I'm not available for this energy," or "you're projecting," instead of engaging with humility and curiosity. 4. Virtue signaling. They constantly reference how kind, empathic, or evolved they are. But you'll notice their behavior doesn't always match their words, especially in moments of stress. 5. No tolerance for critique. Any attempt to hold them accountable is met with defensiveness or silence. They'll often twist the situation to make you feel like the aggressor. The irony is that many of these people believe they are doing the right thing. They don't see the mask. They've merged with it. But underneath all the language and light is an exile of their own shadow. And what we exile doesn't disappear. It controls us unconsciously. That's why it's so important to recognize this dynamic before you get pulled in too deep, because these individuals often attract empaths, healers, and highly sensitive people who want connection. They'll initially feel like a safe haven. You'll feel seen, validated, maybe even chosen. But as soon as you show something messy or real, the dynamic shifts. Suddenly your emotions are too much, your boundaries are aggressive, your truth is judgmental, and your pain becomes a low frequency that disrupts their peace. This is emotional manipulation wrapped in spiritual language, and it's one of the most toxic dynamics you can find yourself in. So what do? You stay rooted in your own integrity. You stop trying to explain your pain to someone committed to misunderstanding it. You stop seeking validation from people who only love the filtered version of you. And most importantly, you stop arguing with their mask, because it was never about you. It was about their fear of meeting themselves. Remember, people who have not faced their shadow will demand that you abandon yours. They will ask you to shrink, to filter, to silence, all under the guise of peace and growth. But real growth looks very different. It's loud, it's messy, it's raw. It requires falling apart, feeling lost, being wrong, being humbled. And that's okay. You are not here to be palatable. You are here to be whole, to be honest, to be alive. So when someone punishes your authenticity, walk away. Don't beg them to see you. Don't try to convince them of your worth. You were never the one who needed convincing. In fact, let this be your sign. If someone only loves the part of you that's easy, quiet, or convenient, it's not love, it's control. True connection welcomes your complexity. It honors your shadow. It says, "I see your mess and I'm not scared of it. I see your anger and I won't shame it. I see your grief and I will not abandon you." And if you've never had that before, let me tell you something. You deserve it. You deserve to be seen in your wholeness. Not just your light, not just your achievements, not just your calm, but also your rage, your fear, your guilt, your doubt, everything that makes you real. Because that's where the soul lives, not in the mask, but behind it. And the more you live from that place, the more you will repel those who can't meet you there. That's not rejection, that's alignment. So let them go. Let the mask wearers fade, let the false light dim, because on the other side of that is something deeper, something truer, something alive. You. So what do you actually do when you see it? When you recognize that someone is projecting a false self, hiding behind spiritual language, avoiding accountability and punishing your authenticity? Here's where the real power begins. Because recognition is the beginning of liberation. First, pause. Give yourself space to feel what's really happening. You may notice cognitive dissonance, a split between what the person says and what your body feels. That tension is not a mistake. It's your nervous system whispering, pay attention, trust it. Then, observe patterns. Has this person repeatedly invalidated your feelings in the name of positivity? Do they use spiritual ideas as weapons, labeling your boundaries as ego, your grief as low vibration, your anger as wounding? Have you noticed that the closer you get, the less free you feel? If so, you're not crazy. You're waking up. Now comes the hard part. Disengage. Not from anger, not from revenge, from clarity. You are allowed to leave people who manipulate light to avoid shadow. You are allowed to walk away from someone who spiritualizes your suffering instead of holding space for it. You are allowed to outgrow people who cannot grow with you. It doesn't make you unkind. It makes you honest. Now listen carefully. When you leave a dynamic like this, guilt will come, especially if you are empathic, especially if you were trauma bonded, especially if they positioned themselves as a guide or savior. But guilt is not a reliable signal in this context. It's a residue of conditioning, especially if you were raised to prioritize harmony over honesty. Let it come, then let it pass. Don't confuse discomfort with wrongness. In fact, the more whole you become, the more discomfort you will feel when standing next to someone who hasn't begun that journey. It's not judgment, it's resonance. Your soul can't fake connection once it's tasted the real thing. And here's the thing, the more honest you become, the more you will be misunderstood. By people still committed to masks, by communities that thrive on performance, by individuals who cannot tell the difference between authenticity and aggression because they've never felt safe being real. That's okay. Let them misunderstand you. You're not here to convince the blind to see. You're here to live in truth, not play pretend. And the more you commit to truth, the more you will attract those who speak its language. Not with perfect words, but with embodied presence, with integrity, with softness that doesn't collapse, with strength that doesn't dominate, with eyes that don't flinch when you cry, rage, grieve, or tremble. That's the gift of walking away. You make space for real connection, for depth, for mutual growth, for people who love the whole of you, not just the easy parts. But here's the final truth. You must give this to yourself first. You must stop abandoning your rage to be loved. Stop silencing your grief to be accepted. Stop shrinking your boundaries to keep the peace. Because the parts of you that someone else tried to shame are the very parts that hold your aliveness. And when you honor them, when you say, I'm not hiding anymore, I'd rather be whole than liked, that's when your life begins. That's when healing becomes not just a process, but a posture. You walk differently, you speak differently, you choose differently. You no longer beg to be chosen because you already chose yourself. This is what Jung meant when he said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you were trained to be, not who they needed you to be, not who you became in order to survive, but you. Messy, brilliant, wounded, radiant. Your job now is to create space for that emergence, to unlearn the silence, to deprogram the shame, to feel your truth more deeply than the world around you allows, and to remember, the shadow isn't your enemy, it's your doorway. To intimacy, to creativity, to vitality, to love, not performance-based love, not fragile love, but the kind of love that knows you and stays. Let me tell you something radical. Your wounds are not barriers to love. They are the place where love begins, but only when you stop performing healing and start living it. That means showing up unfiltered. That means not fixing everything before you share it. That means not polishing every sentence before you speak. That means saying, This is who I am right now, and even in this, I am worthy. The moment you start doing that, your life begins to change. Because you stop attracting people who love your image and start attracting people who love your truth. And yes, it may get lonely at first. There will be fewer people, but they will be real. You won't have to hide. You won't have to perform. You won't have to twist into shapes to keep someone interested. You'll just breathe and be met. That's the reward of walking away from false light. You find real warmth, real presence, real belonging. But it begins with a single act, choosing yourself. Not the mask, not the persona, not the polished script of spiritual acceptability, but the raw, untamed, honest you. The one who still aches, the one who still doubts, the one who still gets triggered, overwhelmed and afraid. That's not weakness, that's life. And you're allowed to be here as you are, not later, not when you're fully healed, now. So if someone makes you feel like your complexity is a problem, they are not your people. If someone loves the idea of you but punishes your honesty, they are not your people. If someone insists you must filter your pain to be accepted, they are not your people. Walk away. Walk toward yourself. Walk toward the people who see you, not just the parts of you that are easy to digest. This is the real work. This is the true healing. This is the alchemy of the shadow. And this is how we become free.